Welcome to our show here tonight. Welcome to We'll Sing and We'll Shout. And I will do some singing and shouting here tonight. Debro Bajalowitz. I actually stopped by and visited a friend of mine who speaks Russian. He comes from a country just below Russia. He's not a big fan of Russia. He made that pretty clear. He loves the people, he loves the culture, he loves the country, but he's not a big fan of the political situation and leadership there in Russia. He made that pretty clear. But I did try out some of my Russian on my friend Sam. And so that was kind of fun. I actually built Sam a deck, a really nice deck. I want to say it was about 12 by 40. And we used Ipe, which is a hardwood product that comes out of Brazil. And we built him this beautiful deck. And I just wanted to stop by there and see how his deck was performing. And Sam and I had a really interesting conversation about a number of things. So sometime maybe we'll come back and talk about Sam some more sometime. Beautiful day here in Provo, Utah. I don't think it was 80 degrees, but it had to be pretty close. Beautiful sunny day. When I'm done with my live here, I'm actually going to go over to the church and play some basketball with the guys tonight, with the older guys, and it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Because I can play pretty effectively with the younger guys. So when I'm out here with the older guys, it's going to be interesting. Um, just bragging a little bit, it appears that nobody's watching me right now, so I'm really just talking to myself. But I think my sister will be jumping in here. She's really my biggest fan, my most loyal fan, and sometimes it seems like my only fan. But nonetheless, we're going to jump in here. I just want you to know I'm not intimidated by that. I'm not intimidated by the fact that I have so few fans. One of the things I've learned in my life is how that whole popularity thing works, and how fake and how false that world really is, and why we should really never chase that world for the wrong reasons. And uh, and so I don't feel that way at all. I know that if this is meant to happen, it will happen in the right time, in the right way, and when it does happen, I will probably hardly be ready for it. And that is based on my past experience with things. So not at all discouraged about that whole situation. Not at all. Um, I wanted to. So it's Thursday. It's Throwback Thursday. I wanted to kind of share some things from way back in my early childhood again, about my experiences with the medical community and with doctors, and why I have maybe such some hard feelings, some very hard feelings about some things that I experienced growing up, and why I have such a uh, negative attitude and feelings towards this whole medical community. When I was, I've shared that my mom had problems with mental illness throughout her adult life, and was a initial, or it, she was finally diagnosed as bipolar. And because of the heavy drugs that they had her on, it would cause her to gain weight. And then eventually she died at age 58 due to heart complications. But she also was hypoglycemic, among other types of metabolic dysfunctional things. And I've come to truly believe that she was very much metabolic dysfunctional, insulin resistant. And had she understood the things that I now understand, and had the tools that I now have, I totally believe that she could have changed her life. But because she struggled so much, I spent more than half my early years with my grandparents on the farm. But but as I grew, it was determined that I was hyperactive, and I don't really remember my early breakfast experiences with my mom, but I do remember my breakfast experiences there on the farm with grandma. I have many memories of that. They are perfectly clear. And grandma's favorite breakfast for me, and perhaps Cheryl was a part of this too, was honeycombs and Tang. Except the Tang was only half strength; it was watered down Tang. Grandma wanted to make that Tang stretch, so we would have honeycombs and watered down Tang. The honeycombs always came with some kind of little prize in the box, so that was always kind of fun. But this is how I was fed as a child, was these ultra processed foods. I was starting out my mornings with processed sugar in the form of Tang, and highly processed carbohydrates in the form of honeycombs. And then everybody around me scratched their heads and wondered, gosh, why is that boy hyperactive? And so I don't think there's any question in my mind that I had metabolic issues early on. And as I said, I don't remember exactly what mom might have been feeding me, but it may have been a very similar thing. And I will say that once mom settled into the farm and got maybe some more nutrition education from doctors or whatever, she really did try to feed us better breakfasts experiences, and we would have eggs and bacon and different things. And one of my favorite breakfast, Cheryl, was the cream tuna. She would take tuna, obviously, mix it with some Campbell's mushroom soup, um, maybe some flour, maybe, I don't know what all was going on in there. You probably know, Cheryl. Heidi makes a version of that, but it's a little different than Mom's. She doesn't use the mushroom soup, but I love Mom's cream of tuna, and she would put that on whole wheat bread for me. And while that's still a lot of carbohydrates, it's not refined carbohydrates. It's very healthy whole wheat bread, and the cream tuna was great. Loved that meal. So, but because it was determined that I was ADHD, I think early on at age 5, they decided to put me on Ritalin. They didn't know how to get to the root cause of the problem and solve my metabolic issues, or maybe consider feeding me a little more nutrition for breakfast instead of a bunch of sugar. They decided to put me on Ritalin. And Ritalin is a drug that certainly has some benefits, but it also has some serious side effects, especially for young children. And one of those is that it stunts your growth. And I actually looked this up here just today. It stunts your growth. It has other negative impacts. Kids don't sleep as well, um, whatever. So, and I could actually feel that as a child when I would take this drug, when I would take this pill, I could feel it impacting me and affecting me. And I believe it was really when I would spend time up on the farm in Bellevue, it was really my grandfather who kind of just felt like, this kid, he doesn't need to be on this drug. I think he could see the way it was affecting me too. And he could see that, what this kid really needs is he needs to drive some tractors. He needs to do some chores. He needs to learn how to use a pitchfork. And Grandpa was Grandpa was certain that that approach to my health and well-being was going to be much more effective than giving me some kind of drug. So maybe after about 2 years, I do remember in first grade, I would have to go up to the teacher's desk at some point, maybe around noon or whatever. And I think it was around noon. I would probably take this right before lunch, I think. I think the idea was you take it with a meal because it would upset the stomach if you didn't. So I would have to go up to the desk there to this teacher who didn't like me there at Indian Springs and get my little pill, and that was supposed to calm down me and make me a better student. Um, but I don't know what I was eating for lunch back in those days. It was probably more sugar and more carbohydrates. So they weren't really solving my metabolic issues, but they were putting me on drugs. And that is so often what our medical community does. And it still happens today. I mean, like nothing has changed. We still, when we have a problem, we just give somebody a drug. We don't try to understand what is the real root cause here. What can we do to solve the problem instead of just cover up the problem? And that's why I have a real issue with the whole medical community. That's why I have a real issue with doctors. I mean, if I need stitches or something like that, these people are good at putting people back together. But when it comes to solving internal problems, it seems like the answer is always, well, let's put them on a drug, and let's put them on another drug, and let's put them on a third drug. I mean, that's the way we solve problems here. Instead of in helping people to get healthier, we just cover things up with drugs. And that's what they did to me as a young boy, and it did have negative effects, and it did stop my growth for a while. Maybe there were some long-lasting impacts. Don't really know how to evaluate all that, but I do know that it wasn't too many years after that, Cheryl. I think this was second and third grade that Mom had this doctor that she was working with on her nutrition and her metabolic issues. And this doctor was somewhere down in Wheeling, West Virginia. I just remember Mom and I made this trip down there at least once. I think we made it twice. I don't think we went 3 times, but we would drive down, and I know Steubenville would be a part of this. And I don't know if we were driving down to Wheeling and staying in Wheeling and then going to an appointment in Steubenville, or vice versa, or we just drove through Steubenville. I don't really know, but I know Steubenville and Wheeling, West Virginia were both involved in this trip because I distinctly remember those names. I also remember I also remember that. Sorry, there was just a note came in here from somebody that lost track of thought here. What else do I remember? Now I don't remember what I remembered. Um, well, it was down there in this doctor's office. What happened to that Dallas Cowboy magazine? It was down there in that doctor's office that I first saw this magazine. I want to grab this here. It was down there in this doctor's office that I first saw this magazine. So this is very helpful because this magazine came from January 5th, 1976. And this was where I read about the Dallas Cowboys beating the Minnesota Vikings in the playoffs so that they could go on. And I think that was, oh, you're trying my Super Bowl memory here. I think this was Super Bowl 10. And I was in fourth grade, and they went and got beat by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Super Bowl. But I went down there and I saw this article and I read it, and I decided that I was going to be a Dallas Cowboy. Um, and Drew Pearson, which this is not actually a picture of Drew Pearson, this is Preston Pearson, and it says that right there, Preston Pearson. But Drew Pearson was actually the one who caught the game-winning touchdown pass, and that is not what they put on here for whatever reason. But the Drew caught the game-winning touchdown pass. The Dallas Cowboys beat the Minnesota Vikings, and Steve Hansen became their most dedicated, loyal fan that day. And I would get the Dallas Cowboy Weekly. I had Dallas Cowboy stuff up in my bedroom, and I also then, because of the Dallas Cowboy Weekly, became aware of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders because there would always be one cheerleader in the centerfold of the Dallas Cowboy Weekly. So that's when I would say my interest in cheerleaders really took off. So there we are down in Wheeling, West Virginia, and this guy, this doctor, he had a long name. It probably ended with a ski, but he had a long name, and he was working with mom on her metabolic health. And mom drugged me along because she thought, let's see what we can do to help Steve with his metabolic health. And it was determined that because this Ritalin had maybe stunted my growth, they determined that that was the case. They put me on a bunch of vitamins, and there was like 8 big vitamins, and these were like decent sized pills. I remember 2 of them were white. There was one that was kind of brown with some red going through it. Looked like a football, had a weird taste to it. I don't remember the other shapes, but they were just like 8 vitamins, like a handful of vitamins. And I was supposed to nail these things every day, take these things every day. And I think it was a lunchtime thing again, so I would have to have these at school. And the teacher would keep these in her drawer and have to hand Steve his handful of pills every day. And and that was what was going on in fourth grade for me. Now, I don't think this lasted very long. In fact, I really don't think this went with me to fifth grade. And maybe it started in third grade. Maybe it was a third grade and fourth grade thing. But when this magazine came out, January 5th, 1976, I would have been like 9 years old. So I'm taking my, I got away from the one little pill. Now I've got a handful of vitamins I'm supposed to be taking. And that too, I know, was upsetting my stomach. Like I wasn't getting along well with all this toxicity going on that these folks were pumping into my 9-year-old body. But I would try to take these pills, and there was one in particular that was really decent size that I just really hated to try and to have to swallow this thing. And so my friend Billy Belo was in our class. Billy had an older sister and some younger siblings. He lived there in Flat Rock. They came from a very, very poor family. These people were truly dirt poor. And if you're familiar with Flat Rock, you know where the general store is. If you went 1 block to the east on Water Street, Billy's house was right there on the corner of Water and Trail 1051. That's where Billy's house was. But at some point, I want to say during 5th or 6th grade, there was a fire and that house burned down. And I think everybody got out. I don't think there was anybody that got killed there, but that was the end of Billy's house there. And then they ended up out in some farm or some house in the country nearby. And then that was a tough situation. There were some tough stories that came out of that family, and we don't need to go down that road. But Billy was a friend in fourth grade, and I considered him to be a good friend. And one of the things Billy would do for me is he would take some of these vitamins for me. He would swallow some of these vitamins for me, so I didn't have to take them all. And he would call them dope, like, hey Steve, I'll take some of your dope for you. I'll take one for the team. And so Billy would swallow some of my dope, and and that was just like, the best friend I had there. He was sticking up for me, helping me out, taking some of my dope for me, so I didn't have to swallow all that stuff. So that's one of the things I remember about that whole vitamin experience. But eventually, it got me off of that nonsense, and from there on out, I think I just tried to eat better foods and healthier foods, and certainly the farm work and everything that was going on there was very healthy for a young boy. So that was uh, that was my throwback Thursday there. That I just wanted to share that experience with Ritalin, and my experience with taking all those vitamins, and my friend Billy taking my dope for me. Um, the the other thing and that is where I my frustration with the medical community comes from, because even as a young boy, it's like you can feel what's going on here. You can feel these doctors who act like they know what they're doing and act like they understand all the implications of their choices, just doing things to you and to your young body, and they don't really have to live with the consequences, so really they don't really care. And I think about what's going on in the world today with all this sex change and sex transition nonsense, and the way these people are abusing these children. And to me, it's just really, really, really sick. And the things that happen to me are so small compared to the nonsense that's out there today in our medical community. And to me, a lot of these people, they need to be locked up. They really do. They need to be locked up and sent away. So that's how I feel about all that. I had this experience this week. I lost 40 pounds in a little more than 100 days, maybe 120 days. But starting in July 23rd, I lost 40 pounds in about 120 days. And since then, I have really pretty much stayed level around 180. Sometimes I've kind of been between 175 and 180. Now, right there around the first of the year, I did that 5-day fast that ended on January 1st, and I actually got right under 170. But as anyone would guess, a lot of that was water weight, and that weight came back on rather rapidly. And so, even though the fast was an amazing experience, I really enjoyed that. I plan to do it again next year, but I was not able to maintain anything down close to 170. So I've been sitting here around 180, 175, 180 here the last 3 months, wanting to get lower, wanting to get lighter, and not being able to make any progress. Now I have lost another inch or two on my waist. I have felt things continue to heal, and like I've continued to feel change. And I've been very dedicated to my fasting program. I was fasting I averaged 20 hours a day of fasting during January. Like I really nailed down on that. During February, I kind of let loose because I was going to be in Tahiti and different things. So my goal was just 16 hours a day during February. And I've kind of maintained that goal during March, although I think my average, as I look at it today, my average during March is about 17 hours. So, um, but still, I'm not losing the weight that I want to. I'm not thinning out and leaning out more. There's still more fat on this body than I want. Many of you would say, "Gosh, Steve, you look great," and I hear that comment around. I heard it when I walked into the bank today. I heard it when I went and visited my friend Sam today. People can see the difference, and I really appreciate that. But I'm looking for more. I know where I want to be, and I'm not there yet. So this has been on my mind a lot. And, like, what kind of change do I need to make here? What do I need to do different? Why do I have such a hard time? I do great with my fasting, but when it's time to sit down and eat, I can't control my intake as much as I want to, as much as I need to. Like, what change do I need to make here? And this has been a matter of a lot of thought, and maybe some prayer, and I'm trying to get this figured out. This amazing protocol, this amazing system I'm on. Why can't I make the progress that I want? And then, as I'm in the shower on Monday, this voice that kind of speaks to me sometimes this voice kind of started talking to me a little bit, and not something that I could hear, but something that I could feel. And the voice just really kind of said, why don't you just do the program? Why don't you do the program the way it's meant to be done? Why don't and what and the message there was, ever since I started this, the program is that you use one of these balance, this fiber matrix before your main meal. That's the gist of the program there. And then you're supposed to use two of these unamates, maybe one in the morning and one in the afternoon, or but the idea is one of these and two of these. Well, I found early on that if I just use one of these with dinner and one of these in the morning, that I could have success. And I lost those 40 pounds, 45 pounds, just doing this, just doing one of these and one of these. But the message that I got there on Monday was, why don't you just do the program? Why are you so stubborn? Why don't you just go ahead and do two of these? And I got to thinking about it, and I said, you know what? This naturally raises my GLP-1. That's exactly what I need to do a better job of controlling my appetite when I do eat. Why don't I just do this? Why am I so stubborn? Here I am sharing this and telling everybody how great it is, but I'm not really doing the program. So ever since Monday, today is Thursday, ever since Monday, I've been doing that. I've been faithfully doing two of these every day. Now, there have been times over the last 8 months when I have done two a day, but it's maybe a dozen days. It's not like, really regular. But I've decided that that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the program the way it's meant to be done. I'm going to use two of these Unamates a day. And one of the things that happened is before we went to Ruth's Chris yesterday, I was down 4 pounds in 2.5 days. All I did was add the extra Unamate. That gave me the extra control that I needed, and I was down 4 pounds in 2.5 days. Now, we went out last night with Catherine, and I had probably a 5,000 calorie meal. I mean, I don't know how much it was, but it was a lot. Like, I ate till I was full, and then I ate some more, and I enjoyed every bit of it, and it was amazing. And I did not get into the leftovers today, but I will be getting into those leftovers tomorrow, and I will enjoy that very much. But that is my new approach, is to say, hey, why don't I just do the program the way I'm supposed to do it, and we will see what happens. But based on my experience of the last 3 days, I think it's going to be effective. I think it's going to allow me to move on down to where I need and want to be. So that's my message here on Throwback Thursday. And I really appreciate anybody who pops in here and listens to me carry on. Um, really appreciate my sister sticking up for me and being a team player and helping me along with this. And I appreciate people's likes and loves and comments and anything you've got to throw at me. But I hope everybody has a good night. I'm going to get myself pulled together here, go play some basketball at the church. And we will catch you all tomorrow night on We'll Sing